So I know a lot of the webinars we've been doing lately at Landsmark Capital have focused on the negative and the downsides of premium financing programs that use interest accrual. So oftentimes I'll be asked the question, how dangerous is interest accrual in premium financing? And more importantly, is Landsmark Capital anti-interest accrual when it comes to using it in premium financing? Well, to more specifically answer that question, the real issue with interest accrual is it's just a tool. Okay, interest accrual is a tool that can either be used responsibly or irresponsibly. And what I've seen in the premium financing industry over the last several years, we see more and more of what I would call irresponsible use of interest accrual. The challenge with the way that it has been modeled in the premium financing space has been that these interest accrual programs show a positive index credit, a perpetual positive index credit, as well as a borrowing rate that is less than that index credit. So, of course, if you've got the policy crediting greater than the borrowing rate is accruing all that negative debt, then it's going to work. But the problem is that is not the way that reality oftentimes works. So a poorly designed situation is going to really put that client in jeopardy. So we say, if interest accrual is used irresponsibly, bad things can happen, right? The foundation can completely fall apart. That debt with the lender could be outpacing the cash value growth of the policy, and then the client's going to be in a situation where the policy is underwater and they're not going to be able to pay the third-party lender off, at least not within the time frame that the premium financier has modeled. And so, these poorly designed programs, it's kind of funny at the screen here, this is the way that we look at poorly designed interest accrual premium financing programs. They just don't make any sense. The reason our lens on these programs tells us that they don't make any sense, whereas the policy illustrations or the carrier illustrations, they do appear to make sense, again, is because they're showing a positive arbitrage being gained all the way through until the very end. And of course, if you have a policy that's performing at a 6% index credit perpetually, and you show a borrowing rate that never eclipses 3 or 4%, well, of course, you've got a 2 or 3% positive arbitrage. So again, that does not work all the time. And what we also see within those programs is they use these gimmicky fixes. In other words, they'll use these higher cash value riders that boost the cash value in the very early years of the policy, specifically in the first half a dozen to a dozen years. They do that to minimize the amount of gap collateral that the client would have to post. Obviously, those higher cash value riders come at a cost. The damages the long-term effectiveness of cash value growth. But again, the problem is that most people really don't know what is fake and what is fact. And to the untrained eye, again, if the agent or the client or the financial professionals that are looking at a potential premium financing design that uses interest accrual, they don't have the lens that we do. In other words, they don't have the back testing and stress testing software to properly model premium financing programs to see just how sustainable they really are under adverse market conditions. And so, again, the challenge is that it's very difficult for someone that doesn't specialize in that back testing and stress testing space to know what is real and what is fake. So, for example, on the screen here, right, the Rolex Daytona on the left-hand side of the screen is the real one. The one on the right is a fake. It's a replica. And it's very difficult to know what is real and what is fake if you don't specialize in this particular area. So what we're going to show here is what we call the mirage of irresponsible leverage. This is a case that came across our desk 2 weeks ago, and the client was looking at this design here. Now, this ledger here is what the other premium financier showed the client. So if we see there on the left-hand side of the screen there, That is the out-of-pocket that this program is modeling or suggesting that the client should pay. So they're paying the first 2 years $72,000 out of pocket, and then they're paying $60,000 a year in years 3 through 10. Again, this is not a Landsmark Capital design. This is, we'll just call it competitor X, right? So competitor X was showing a client this here. So as we see here in the first 3 years of the policy, the interest expense is less than what they show the client paying into the program. I believe some of that is going towards paying some principal, so they're borrowing a little bit less than the total policy premium. And then once the policy hits year 4, we see that the interest expense or the interest due is greater than that $60,000 outlay that program is showing that the client contribute. And then they're accruing the rest. On top of that, they're showing a payoff, a third-party lender payoff in the 15th year. So in the 14th year, we see there, though the client has only borrowed $4.4 million in premium from the lender, they have accrued $5.6 million in debt. So the next year, when they go to pay off that third-party lender, they're paying off that total accrued balance of $5.6 million using the policy value. Now, the very next year, they show the client pulling out a pretty substantial income drawdown. That income drawdown starts in year 16 in the amount of $340,000. Then they show the client pulling out $400,000 for the next 5 years and $425,000 for the next 5 years, and that continues on all the way out to the very end. It's kind of crazy. So they're showing a perpetual income drawdown coming out that never ends. So I looked at this design and I said, there's no way this is possible. So what we did was we got a hold of the actual carrier illustration. This is the actual carrier illustration. And sure enough, they show a very similar situation here. So they show the client pulling out $320,000, not $340,000, but $320,000 a year, starting in policy year 16, which is the year after they're showing the third-party lender payoff in year 15. And then they show that client continue to pull out a substantial amount of income that just keeps increasing. As Pee Wee Herman there on the right-hand side, he's apparently shocked as well. So we looked at this and we said, geez, they're using some very serious assumptions here. The first assumption that they're using is that the policy shows a perpetual positive index credit of 5.67% from year 1 all the way out, right? So no zeros, it's just a static positive 5.67% return. So we said, well, geez, let's remodel this thing. So we re-illustrated this using all the same assumptions. And this happens to be a carrier that I really like. But the way it was designed, the policy was designed, is not a way that I would design this policy. It's kind of like you could have a Ferrari and disassemble the Ferrari and have a novice put that Ferrari back together with all Ferrari parts. Yes, it's a Ferrari. Yes, all the parts are Ferrari. But the engineer that put it back together did not know what he was doing. And in this case, this is a very... Again, I don't want to talk bad about the advisor or the premium financiers that put this program together. This is just not the way that we would do this. So we reconstructed it and redesigned it in the carrier software. The limitation, however, was the AG49 maximum rate back when this policy was originally shown to the client by firm X. They illustrated it at 5.67%. Well, the new AG49 maximum illustrated rate for this carrier currently is 5.41%. So when we reran the illustration at 5.41%, something very interesting happened here. Again, not that less of an index credit, but when we did the same loan payoff, same exact policy design, loan payoff in year 15, income drawdown starting in the 16th year, when we try to pull out $320,000, the policy shows a lapse in year 18. Now, again, what's the difference here? Everything about this policy design, we literally mimicked what the other premium financier put together. The only difference is that the policy was run at a 5.41% index credit versus 5.67%. And here we show a lapse in year 18, which is egregious. This is what will set you up for a lawsuit in the future. So again, everything looks perfect on paper when it was illustrated at 5.67%. But as we see here, illustrated just 20 bips less, it completely falls apart. So this is really what makes Landsmark Capital very, very unique. We have proprietary software that will stress test and back test any design, including our own, obviously, but we can also stress test and back test a competitor's design if a client is considering a program that's offered by a competitor of ours. Yeah, that's the alarm that goes off right there. The alarm is essentially for the volatility modeling. In our opinion, you have to model volatility of performance and a poor sequence of returns to really see if a premium financing design is going to hold up over time or not. So one of the rebuttals to our criticism of these premium financing programs that fall apart is that, well, if the policy doesn't perform as expected, well, the client could just not pay off the loan so soon. They could defer the loan payoff. Okay, well, that is true. So here's what we did. We took a look at the last 20 years of the S&P performance. So this is essentially the last 20 years rolling back from 2019. The middle column there, that is what the S&P 500 did in those corresponding years, not including S&P dividends. And in the right-hand column, we are showing a 0% floor and an 8.5% cap. And that is what the crediting method used in that example we just looked at. Okay, so on the left-hand side of the screen, just to give you some context here, over the last 20 years, rolling back from 2019, the compound annual growth rate of the S&P 500, including the S&P 500 dividends, was 6.01%. Not including the S&P 500 dividends, the compound annual growth rate was 3.99%. Now, the reason why we show with dividends and without dividends, obviously in the policy, we don't get the S&P 500 dividend credit, but we wanted to give you some context. This is an environment of the S&P doing just north of 6%. Fully speculative, but again, I think that's taking kind of a middle-of-the-road approach. So this 20-year look back, we believe is something to at least consider, right? Whether it happens or not is a whole other story, but it's certainly an environment to consider. Well, during these 20 years, we would have started off with essentially 3 zeros in a row because we had negative S&P performance. Then we get hit with another zero in the year 2008, which would be policy 9 in the sequence here. We hit another almost zero in the year 2011. We would have another zero in the year 2015 and another zero in the year 2018. So what we're looking at on the screen here, again, this is in an environment of a 6.01% compound annual growth rate of the S&P, including the dividends, and 3.99% not including the S&P dividends. Well, when we model it in our software program, here's what we look at here. So this is, again, the last 20 years of the S&P 500 performance. Our software does have the ability to deconstruct a policy and remodel a scenario using such volatility and backtesting. On this situation here, this IUL does have a multiplier, so the multiplier was applied to the index performance. But again, over this period of time here, we see that we cannot pay off the loan in year 15. When we tried to do that using this backtested period, the policy would have fallen apart. So we could not pay off the third-party lender in year 15. We had to push it out. And even when we push it out here, we see now that the policy does fall into some major problems here, partially due to the policy charges putting a major drag on the policy performance during years of zeros. So we have a negative net value, and which would, in this particular case, require the client to have to post additional collateral that was unexpected, starting in year 22 when they would have to post collateral all the way until policy year 33, and then we could finally pay off the loan in policy year 36. So the argument that, well, you could push off the third-party payoff into the future and it would still, I'm using air quotes here, it would still work. Well, that's true. It would still work if you define work as the policy wouldn't lapse. But here, the client cannot pull out any income. They could, in theory, start pulling out income, I guess, in policy year 37, which would put the client at 75 years old, which is not even close to what the client thought they were going to be able to do. And I guess that's the main problem that we have with these interest accrual programs. In this case, because it's designed to be an income play, a future income play, that interest accrual, just mathematically speaking, does not work if we were going to model this using the last 20 years of S&P performance. So for more information, you can go to our website. We're at landsmarkcapital.com, on the left-hand side of the screen. That is a book that my business partner Jeff Fain and I published last year. You can find this on Amazon. It's called The Definitive Book on Premium Financing, The Good, Bad, Ugly, and Insane Practices Using in a Controversial Industry. And as you saw in that interest accrual model that we just showed, that is certainly the bad and the ugly and, quite frankly, the insane premium financing design that we see a lot of our so-called competitors pushing out there in the market. Again, similar to the real Rolex versus the fake Rolex, you can buy a fake Rolex and put it on your wrist, and initially it looks good, but the reality is after a year or so, that whole thing is going to fall apart and die, and the rotors and everything inside that mechanism is not going to last, and you would have flushed all that money down the toilet. And the last thing you want to do is sell your client the equivalent of a fake Rolex. So again, visit us at landsmarkcapital.com. My name is Darren Sugiyama. I'm one of the managing partners of Landsmark Capital. We look forward to talking to you guys soon. Have a great day.